Each year on Rosh Hashanah, I select a single word for our meditation and contemplation. This year's word is love. Love is an elusive and powerful emotion. And throughout human existence, every culture and every age, love has shaped who we are and how we act. We sing for love, dance for love, compose poems and stories about love. We tell myths and legends, build monuments, and paint masterpieces. We pine for love. We live for love, kill for love, die for love. There is not a single soul in this sanctuary who is unfamiliar with love. Each of us has been transformed by its grasp upon our spirits. We know it from the love we receive from our parents. We have extended it in many forms, as children, as siblings, as neighbors, lovers, and friends. Love is a force that bonds us to each other and ultimately to God. This reality is traditionally reinforced in Jewish communities all over the world, as before we go to sleep at night and when we wake up in the morning, the first thing that traditional Jews do is recite the Shema, coupled with the words of Ve'ahavta, which reminds us constantly that our relationship with God, with our relationship with each other, with our relationship with building a better world around us, starts with love. In the morning and at night, we recite Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha. You shall love the eternal God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. A closer examination of this prayer can help us understand these three distinct kinds of love articulated through our tradition. The love of the heart, the love of the soul, and the love from what is often translated as with all one's might. Each of these sources of human love provide us with a very important vehicle for extending love in our world. Let's take a look at each. B'chol levavcha, to love with all your heart, is an often mistranslated phrase. For in ancient times, love was not something that was seen, the heart, I should say, was not something that was seen as the seat of the emotions, but rather the heart was understood as the organ for wisdom and thinking. Therefore, when we say the words b'chol levavcha, to love with all one's heart, it was never intended to be understood as romantic love, like something on Valentine's Day, but rather a love that reflects the ways in which we think about the world. And so, b'chol levavcha, to love with your heart, is really a commandment to develop a loving mindset. Now, b'chol nafshecha, to love with one's soul, is much more straightforward, because the love of the soul was seen as the essence of who we are. So to love b'chol nafshecha, to love with all one's soul, was really to love and extend love to the world from the very essence of our being. Now, b'chol me'odecha, the third kind of love, is much more complicated to translate, because the word me'odecha is a derivative of an adverb. The adverb is very, like in very good. Tov me'od, we say in Hebrew. How do you translate the adverb very? To love with all one's veriness is to love and love and love even more, to give it all you've got. In essence, this daily recitation from the Torah commands us to cleave ourselves to God by seeing the world, engaging the world, and changing the world through love. Throughout the Torah, this love of God, heart, soul, and more, demands that we see others as extensions of ourselves, embrace them with compassion, and serve them through acts of kindness, generosity, mercy, and grace. David Flood is a motivational speaker whose short video clips have spread all over the world of social media. In his workshops with young people, he will often call upon volunteers to come to the front of the room. And there, as he faces them, he asks these volunteers to complete the following sentence. He looks these students in the eyes and he says, "When I look at you, I see blank." And the students usually look right back at him and they fill in the blank. They say, "When I look at you, I see a nice teacher. When I look at you, I see a man with glasses. When I look at you, I see a man with a beard." And David Flood challenges his students and challenges all of us through these videos as well to take it a step deeper. And so he models for them another way of completing the sentence. He looks them right back in the eyes and he says, "When I look at you, I see me." This simple exercise challenges us to try to stop looking at each other from the outside and start looking at each other from the inside, rather than seeing what kind of clothes we're wearing, rather than seeing that we're losing our hair or that our skin is starting to wrinkle or whatever it may be, these external things that we make judgments upon. We need to start looking, according to David Flood, at the inside of the other. And that's where the seat of this kind of love of the heart resides. This shift in the way that we see each other is the essence of a loving mindset. It's the essence of what the Torah is trying to teach us through Bechol Levavcha, to love with our hearts, to find a way to see another with empathy and kindness in our daily actions. On Yom Kippur, we have another phrase from the Torah that we'll read, which re-emphasizes the same idea. You know this passage well. It says, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," to love your neighbor as yourself. Love others as you yourself want to be loved. At first, this is not an easy thing to do, to look at someone who looks completely different than you and see your own needs, your own pains, your own concerns. But this is exactly what the Torah is commanding us to do. The starting place for a loving mindset is to develop a constant awareness of others. Our yard man's name is Carl. He is one of the kindest, gentlest, loving souls you will ever meet. Unfortunately, Carl is a horrible yard man. At the age of 70 years old, with cancer and dialysis 3 days a week, Carl does the best that he can. Becky and I continue to keep him employed because we are literally his only customers left. It's sad, but he gives his soul to us whenever he comes to mow our lawn and blow our leaves. And we keep him employed because he really, really needs the money. Carl has very, very little. But Carl sees the world with a loving mindset. One day I received a call from Carl. It was a very strange call. He asked me, he calls me Mr. Steve. "Mr. Steve, what's your shoe size?" Strange call from a yard man. I said, Carl, I wear size 8. There's this kind of pregnant, kind of almost disappointed pause on the other side of the phone. He says, well, do you know anybody who wears a size 10? And then he went on to explain to me that whenever he goes to dialysis, the man who sits right next to him doesn't have any shoes. He comes in barefoot, and at the clinic, it just breaks his heart. And he thought, if I could just get some shoes for this man, it would just be so much better. And so we eventually found him some shoes. But the point is that Carl, who has almost no money to buy shoes for himself, could see that this man was in need. He could see and feel the pain of the man sitting next to him week in and week out at the clinic. And he sought to extend the love to his neighbor as he had hoped someone would extend the same kind of love to him. When we begin to see the world through loving eyes, we begin to see the world in an entirely different way. When we interact with each other in loving ways, the entire equation changes. It becomes less about us and much more about the world around us. But the Torah teaches us that a loving mindset is only a starting point, and that we must find ways to translate our loving observations into a transformative soul. Mata Amri Tanan Damai, also known as Amma, which means mother in Hindi, is a woman who has dedicated her entire life to extending selfless, compassionate love to the world around her. Her entire life has been dedicated to alleviating the pain of the poor and those suffering from physical and emotional distress by extending her soul and love. How? Amma is a hugger. Not a hugger like me, where you'll get a big hug at the oneg, or as you're departing services tonight, where I'll give you a big embrace. No, Amma is a hugger at a cosmic level. Throughout her life, she has embraced and comforted over 34 million people. Some will wait in line for 10 to 12 hours just to get a hug from Amma, who inspires, uplifts, and transforms the world through the embrace of her heart and her arms. There are a few members of our congregation who have waited in line for 10 to 12 hours just to receive a hug from Amma. And they have shared with me that through these hugs there is a loving, comforting, soulful grounding, which is extremely difficult to describe. But they all say that when you leave her arms, you feel changed. Now, we don't have to wait in line for 10 to 12 hours to understand the transformative power of a hug. For we all know well the emotionally grounding forces that exist in a loving embrace. In times of pain and sadness, in times of anger and frustration, in times of sickness, and of course in times of romance and passion, the warm embrace of a caring soul changes us. This deep and transforming energy originates from a place deep within us and represents a very familiar example of what the Torah is trying to teach us about loving from the soul. Bechol nafshecha. When we begin to see the world through the lens of a loving heart, bechol levavcha, and then extend ourselves to others from the depths of the soul, bechol nafshecha, we can begin to understand the redemptive aspects of love that resides in the concept of bechol me'odecha, loving with all you've got and more. Loving others and God, bechol me'odecha, with all your might, is a kind of love that shapes who we are, how we act, and how the future will unfold. It is a kind of love that serves to temper justice with mercy, build bridges toward peace, and quiet an angry heart. Love, bechol me'odecha, is a love that motivates us to speak up for those who are voiceless, march in support of those who need representation, and stick our necks out for those who have been wronged. Bechol me'odecha changes us to apply the loving mindset of bechol levavcha and add it to the loving soul from bechol nafshecha in ways that we can use everything we've got and more to promote goodness, kindness, and peace in the world. This kind of all-encompassing love is reflected in the words which were spoken by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he challenges humanity in the following way: we must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we do that, we will make this old world a new world. Our world today is in desperate need of this redemptive and transformative force. We need to rekindle our sense of obligation to extending love to all pockets of society. And this season of renewal can be instrumental in helping us make this shift. On this eve of 5,779, let us begin to see the world through the lens of love, so that we might begin to see a very different world. Let us see the world like Carl, whose mindset of love enables him to recognize that he has the capacity to help others, even though he himself is living in extreme poverty. Let us see the world like Amma, who extends her soul to the world through her loving arms, deeply embracing those in need. Let us see the world through the lens of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose life was devoted to transforming societal injustice with love that was driven by selflessness and sacrifice. Let us see the world through the lens of our faith, the lens of the Torah, which commands us to love bechol levavcha, ubechol nafshecha, ubechol me'odecha. May our love connect us to each other. May our love connect us to God. May our love connect us to the world. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.